many institutions or organizations within the US are experiencing a tumultuous time in hiring best talent. You can be that organization that actually is attracting amazing talent. And I know that the data right now is pretty tough for employers because looking at the data across the US and the numbers that was published right in August, there's so many people, like more than 3+ million people actually resigning from their job, not being laid off. And then there is 50% of our employees are actively looking for jobs elsewhere. These are employees who are already working for you. On top of that, having more than 60% of our employees being disengaged, employers and organizations and leaders like you are having a difficult time in retaining top talent or even attracting top talent. So that's why in this in Facebook Live today, I'm going to talk about why the need for employee engagement. If you're signing and watching us live, love to hear from you. Where are you watching us from? What are some of the things that you're seeing in your organization that they're doing to help employee engagement, improve the employee experience? I would love to hear more. If we haven't met before, my name is Fahim Karim, and I'm an employee engagement expert. I work with companies that are faith and value based, and I work to create a safe container so that everyone gets to vocalize their opinions and their ideas without being put down. Your managers get to lead and listen, and your company continues to innovate and grow. So in today's Facebook Live, I want to discuss more about a topic that's near and dear to my heart and something I mentioned in one of my weekly video is why the need for employee engagement in organization. And some of the data that I shared, it really is amazing. According to Gallup, one of the recent data that they had shared, which is called the meta-analysis of the teams that were performing in the top percentile of employee engagement, they showed 81% less absenteeism, 64% fewer accidents, 41% fewer quality defects, 23% greater profitability, right? So what I wanted to discuss in this live today is to give a deeper understanding of what causes employee disengagement, to give you a better understanding of how I work with some of the clients. So what I wanted to first explain a little bit about the similarity between employee disengagement and an analogy that you can understand or relate to is from our health, which has to do with type 2 diabetes. You see, type 2 diabetes is considered a chronic disease, but the experts who really study it, they'll tell you it's not a chronic disease. It's actually a symptom. And I'll show you some examples here of what I mean. And I'm going to share with you, if time permits, at least one example of how you can identify if you have an employee disengagement and what can be done to address that. So, without further ado, let me give you an example of what I mean. So when you look at the type 2 diabetes, let's say this is the type 2 diabetes. Let's say it's a chronic disease, right? Chronic disease. Okay? Now the things that causes chronic disease are several factors. One is stress. Okay? And the other factors are, let me just bring the mic a little bit closer here. So one is stress. The other one is, let's say, sleep. The other one is physical activity. Right? So we have stress, sleep, physical activity, and also gut health. Right? So there are multiple factors that's actually causing this chronic disease to show up. So when you go to an expert, they who are actually interested in solving the problem that's causing the disease, they will look into all these different factors, and there's actually more. I just, for the interest of time, I just wrote a few. They look at all those factors, and they try to identify where the problem is. So now, what that is called in the medical world, that is what that is called is etiology, right? Etiology versus symptomology. This is a difficult word, right? Symptomatology, right? So in our modern day medicine, most of the doctors that you go to, what symptomology, the definition of that is basically it is the science that studies and classifies the symptoms of a disease. So when you're going to a doctor, a regular GP, all they're looking to do is classify your disease. Okay, this is what you have. Well, what caused it? This is how we're going to treat it. We're going to service it, right? But the other one, which is the actual etiology, it actually it tries to look at what is causing the illness, right? So etiology of illness falls is basically determination of a cause of a disease or pathology, understanding the source of the disease and its control. And it focuses on the backstory of the disease, right? So when it comes to employee engagement, that's what we focus on here at Gear to Harvest. We're not looking to give you a pill that's going to make your problem temporarily go away. We look at we look at personalized treatment, personalized way of identifying what's causing it. So let me give an example of what I mean, some of the factors that causes employee disengagement. So I take these out. And let's say I do, this is employee disengagement, right? There's several things that causes it. One of them, let me just draw a few of them here so you can get an idea of those factors. I hope you can see it. Change, leadership, okay? Then there is the process, okay? Then there is the organizational structure or bureaucracy. So we used to have 7, right, doing all our spell checks. And so here is just 3 of them, and there's more. So there's, of course, others like incentives that you're giving your teams or employees. What are you incentivizing? Then you have external factors. An example of external factors are your vendors, right? The applications you're dependent on somebody else. Then there's the toxic culture, and there's more. So there's several factors, right? I'm just giving you an idea. Like, these are the different things that are causing your employees to get disengaged. Okay, and there's more to that. So just to give you an idea briefly, so one example, when I worked with a client of mine, and they asked me for my help, and so this particular organization was experiencing very low morale, and this team was very high risk, high volume transaction, and very important part of the organization. However, the team was going through employee disengagement. So what I looked at, various factors like those. So when I spoke to the management of that team, the manager was excellent, right? So it wasn't a leadership issue. It wasn't a leadership issue. So when I looked closely, what I found out, it had to do with process. So in this particular department, what happened is they had just gone through a huge project that was part of a system conversion, and the person who completed that project did a really terrible job of change management of how the employees are going to be impacted. The processes were much more broken since this implementation of this new system. What was happening is, let's say they were producing 100 units. Out of those 100 units, more than 50 of them were defective. So the employees who are now stuck with this new system and the side effects of that are spending twice as much time trying to get those 100 units produced, right? And it's a ripple effect. Next day, rather than starting with zero, they're still dealing with the items that were failing from the previous day. And it's like a rolling effect, right? So together we came up with a tactical solution and also a strategic solution, and the problem was addressed. The employees were much, feeling much more happier about their work, and it had to do with process. In that case, it wasn't management training, it was more to do with process. So that's an example I wanted to share with you on how to identify if you have an employee disengagement problem. The other one is, for example, the incentives. Sometimes you may be not realizing it, but the incentives that you have in place is what may be causing the employee disengagement. An example of that, let's say you have a sales team that is expected to produce a certain number, and when they reach that number, that's the only time they will receive that bonus, right? However, that number is so unrealistic that every time an average salesperson looks at that, they're like, I'm never going to achieve that. So why are they doing this to me, right? So they're expecting me to fail. So in that case, incentives are actually demotivating. And so looking at that and finding out what was the cause of that, in this case, you would find out it's the incentive. And that is one example. The other one, another example I want to give you of a process is that, let's say you hired, this is a real life example, a company implemented a new sales lead generation tool. So it was a company that was now getting leads for people who are just newly moving into the neighborhood. So now the salespeople were given these phone numbers of these new leads that are just moving into the neighborhood that they can start calling and offer their services. But it failed. Why? The reason it failed is because the process was never updated, right? The procedure manuals were never updated. So the salesperson, who's usually used to picking up the phone call and calling the client and saying, hey, I was referred to by your friend so and they asked me to give you a call. Now they don't know what to say when they pick up the phone. They can't just say, hey, I got your number from a system that we just implemented, and I'm calling to. So basically they need a script in that particular instance. So that was causing them to become disengaged because they were not showing the higher results that what management was expecting from giving them this new CRM tool, but just the process was not enhanced, because of which the employees were getting demotivated and disengaged. So I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what are some of the challenges you're seeing in your organization that has to do with employee disengagement. What are some of the things that you're feeling that might be something that you're seeing that is causing your employees to either leave the organization or being more low morale? If you are having some challenges on identifying the root cause, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to do a complimentary session with you. Or it's called the Disengage to Dynamic Teams Breakthrough meeting with me, where I'll really listen to the problems you're facing and what can be done, and I'll be happy to give you 2 of my best recommendations. And if you found this live helpful, please tag someone that will benefit from it. Let them also find out how they can benefit from my work. and I'm happy to offer them as a complimentary service, like I mentioned, to just to give them some two quick recommendations that I feel would be the best solution for them right now, and no obligations at all. So, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if you're watching this later on, where you're watching this from, and what are some of your feedback on your organization, and or as a leader, what are some of the things you found was effective in engaging your employees, or you found things that are actually causing disengagement. I'd love to hear that. Until we meet next time, God willing, tread softly, speak kindly, and love unconditionally.